Hello, everyone. I'm Zach Kulig. I am from the Palatine Jaycees and the Training Programs Director for the Illinois Jaycees. Thank you all for joining me this evening for a brief introduction to parliamentary procedures and how, in my experience, the Palatine Jaycees have used it, and how I've seen the Illinois Jaycees use it, and how I hope you can bring it to your home chapters or your own projects as chairman and chairwomen to make your meetings flow a little smoothly or more smoothly, and just have a better sense of order to them. So with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. We'll get this rolling. All right, hopefully everyone should be able to see the intro to Parley Pro. All right, great. All right, oops. So what are parliamentary procedures? Parliamentary procedures, simply put, are procedures put in place by an organization, usually through something like Robert's Rules of Order. That is kind of the go-to for most organizations, all the way from national government. Our own US Senate and House of Representatives use parliamentary procedures, all the way down to your village council. It is a way of moving through an agenda as an organization, keeping things like new business, ongoing old business, and committee reports streamlined so that everyone knows what they're talking about, when to talk about it, and how to talk about it. Simply put, they're a meeting framework. They keep everyone organized, keeps conversation on task, and hopefully efficient. It also ensures that everyone who wants to speak has a chance to speak. As an organization that thrives on promoting the ideas of democracy and saying that when we all swear we're all sworn in as officers, if we've ever taken an oath of office as the Jaycees, we strive to ensure democracy, that all voices who want to speak are heard, and that the express will of the majority is done. Parliamentary procedures help us do that. So how do we, the Palatine Jaycees for me, and the Illinois Jaycees as the state organization, how did we use it in our day-to-day operations, both at the chapter level and the state level for large meetings? So as I said before, it is a overview structure of the meeting. When introducing new projects, we use first and seconds before starting any debate. And that's just not any project, it's really any motion. So this can be things like updating your bylaws as a chapter, ratifying your election results, and then obviously, yes, approving your large scale projects that might involve a bit of money or a significant amount of manpower. For the most part, at least in my experience with the chapter level, it is still fairly informal framework that we use for Robert's Rules of Order. We do not always, rise to the attention of the chair and get acknowledgement from the chair. But in larger environments, especially at the state level, and as you go up through the US, the JCI USA, JCI as its own international body, when you have that many people with that many ideas, you need to have parliamentary procedure to keep everything on task and on topic. This ensures that everyone is talking about the same thing, understands the topic at hand, and can ask questions, make amendments, and move things along in an orderly manner. For me, I'm very much a proponent of implementing some structure of parliamentary procedures to really any committee, from your chapter level, high-end chapter meetings, all the way down through your smaller subcommittees and things like that. For me, Palatine Jaycees are on the doorstep of Hometown Fest. That particular project is several hundreds of thousands of dollars to put this on for the community. We have a very large subcommittee. When we have meetings, that committee has its own agenda. We try to use motions and whatnot when they're needed, but it does keep everyone on task. We know who's reporting, what are we talking about? If we need to make changes, how do we go about and do it? Do we need to make motions? Things like that. So I use this slide when we were talking about specifically for the Palatine Jaycees. I feel like most chapters probably have something similar to this, depending on when they are presenting chapters to their board of directors, presenting projects to their board of directors versus when they're presenting them to their general assembly at their general meetings. So for us, when you're at a board meeting, you are introducing some kind of new project, new idea. If you are on the board of directors, whether that is a vice president, a local director, even a secretary or treasurer, they are on the board. They can simply say, I move to do whatever, I move to approve the budget for Hometown Fest 2022. If you are not a voting member of the board, so say you are just one of the project chairmen or chairwoman, bringing forth your project to the board, since you are not a voting member, you have to entertain a motion, or you would like to entertain a motion for one of the board members to then take up as a first, and then a second, and then you can go ahead and explain what your project is about. At your general meetings for the Palatine Jaycees, we have in our bylaws that anything $300 or below does not need chapter approval for adoption. It only needs board director approval, board of directors approval. Anything over that, since you are a member of the voting body, you can just say, I move to approve. You get your second from someone else in the general population, and you go ahead and talk about your project. Once that discussion is open, that's when things like amendments to your budget, amendments to potentially things that are worded correctly, or maybe contacts need to be changed, that's when amendments are fielded. When amendments are taken up, you are only talking about that specific amendment at the time. All amendments also need seconds. So if you need to change, someone wants to say, oh, I see your budget is only $300. I would like to take it, we think this could be a bigger project. I move to change the budget to $500. You would need the second. Everyone would discuss, who wants to discuss why that budget should or should not be $500. You then take a vote. If that passes, great, the budget is $500. If the motion does not carry, then that amendment is not adopted and the budget just stays at 300. Once a motion is defeated, though, especially an amendment, it can't be retaken. There are some parliamentary rules that allow you to reconsider it if you would like. Reconsidering a failed motion does require a little bit higher. Most things in parliamentary procedure require simple majority. If they don't, smaller organizations like us will generally say you just need a simple majority of 50% plus one to adopt anything. Certain things are written into parliamentary procedure to sometimes require a super majority of either like 3/5 or 2/3 of the voting body to be able to be reconsidered or move on. That's usually things like calling the question and ending discussion on something that requires a 2/3 supermajority, or tabling indefinitely, things like that. I can't stress this enough because it's very easy for all of us to kind of forget this part, especially in our larger meetings, because we are so very passionate about our projects and the things that we do. The number one rule of parliamentary procedure: nothing, no debate, no discussion, no amendments, nothing takes place, nothing happens until there is a motion or a motion / first and a second to uptake it. Once those two are done, that's when all the discussion happens. It's very easy to slide into just start talking about your project or have lots of side conversations talking about how they might change or alter something. Don't do any of that until you are actually taking up the motion at hand with a first and a second. It makes sure that everyone in the room is then on the same page. Everyone is aware of what we're talking about and can give the best feedback, the best analysis they can in the moment that they're talking about it. Again, parliamentary procedure is there so everyone gets a chance to speak. If you have a concern, if you need to make an amendment, if you need the clarification on something, whether that is a vote for closing a motion, whether that is something written in a PMG that you have a question on, this structure gives everyone the power to do that. It doesn't require the president to come in and step in and stop everything. especially at your general meetings. If you have a question or a concern within the framework of parliamentary procedures, you have the power to step up and ask it. So things like asking for a point of order, especially when things seem to be moving off of topic of what is being discussed. Anyone can come up and say, I would like to make a point of order. This last comment is not, we're talking about, for the Palatine Jaycees, this conversation has moved into Brewfest. The original motion was for Hometown Fest. Can we please get back to the original motion at hand? Anyone can step up and do that at any time. So everyone should feel empowered to do so.
Zach, I've got a quick question for
Yes.
you on because the first rule, and that's a great point, because it speaks to even if you disagree or have a concern or want to make an amendment to the motion, you still have to first and second to have that discussion and that amendment made.
That is correct. So people might have opposition to it. And again, that, you can make that when there's a debate on the main motion. You can obviously, that anyone can step in and say if they have a concern. If a motion of it fails, you're trying to change something to make it more agreeable to you, and it doesn't fail, right, and it doesn't go through, then maybe you can still argue your point and say, I don't think that this project, this motion, this rule should carry on. In that case, you would vote no, based on what you were talking about.
Or you can make that amendment to include your concern at that point.
Correct. I found this quote when I was putting this together a while ago, and I think it's a really good point as well, is that all's fair in love, war, and parliamentary procedure. We're all in a young professional organization. We have to remember that when we are in these things, we keep it professional. Parliamentary procedure especially keeps things at the professional level. And so when we are discussing things about differences of opinion, especially in projects, potentially rules and things like that, that none of this is personal. It is simply a professional opinion on changing things. Parliamentary procedure should never be used to attack anyone personally for whatever reason. There are rules specifically in parliamentary procedure stipulating that is not allowed. And again, it keeps everything on a level playing field to know that when we are talking about things, we are talking about the merits of them as they are presented. If there are concerns at the professional level or maybe a fiscal level or something like that, always fair to bring up. But this is not the place that you allow any kind of like personal issues or personal biases to get in the way. So that's all I have for my slides. Thank you guys. If you have any specific questions about how to raise a motion or like specific little like things to ask for, if you want point of information, point of privilege, things like that, I have a little cheat sheet I'm happy to send out to anyone via email. And I can always add stuff for you. But that's really all I have. Again, I try to keep it short and sweet because I really just want to focus on what matters to us and what we see the most of in most of our meetings.
I do have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, go for it.
If you don't mind. So, I mean, everyone has the option to speak. So if there's somebody who may be commenting on everything or taking up too much time, how do you consider that? Is there options of time limits to set for comments, or how do you approach things like that if that's
absolutely
something people are experiencing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in those big things, those big project discussions, or potentially if you're doing things like voting, time limits are always in place. That is up to the chair of the meeting. Most often it's your president can set, like, I'm going to set, discussion on the motion to approve Hometown Fest. It will be held to 15 minutes. After that 15 minutes, we can reconsider to add time. If not, we will stop discussion and we will have our vote. In terms of having the same person kind of speak up over and over again, again, that is at the discretion of the chair of the meeting. What I have done when I have helped out with those large meetings for things like the budget for Palatine or election things is if you have someone who can write down of names who's spoken and just kind of keep a tally mark, that way you can make sure that you're keeping track of everyone. You keep a speaking list. If someone has raised a point and they start talking again, you kind of remind them like, hey, you've made your point. There are other people who have yet to speak. Once everyone has had a chance to speak, we will come back to your point if you still need to speak. But until that point, I want to hear everyone else's opinion on this before hearing from anyone else again.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
There were a couple of comments. I just mentioned having quorum when you were talking about voting majority earlier.
Yep.
Adam mentioned time limits, asking if there were time limits with the Palatine Jaycees.
Yeah, so quorum is usually defined as 3/5, at least in this. We'll tell you it's 3/5. At the local level, you can choose what your quorum is. That is stated in your bylaws, because some people, the quorum for a smaller chapter might be hard to come by versus us. I mean, even for us, like we're a larger chapter, which means we have to have a lot of people to establish a quorum. Adam, to your question, the time limits only come up when the president, so in this case, in this year, it'd be Lindsay, if she believes that discussion needs to be limited to anything, she can set the time limit. The person who's making the motion can also say like, I don't think we need more than X amount of time to talk about this, and can implement it that way. But at the end of the day, it is in the power of the person leading the meeting to limit either set the time limit or limit the discussion if they feel like the discussion is kind of either going in circles or just trickling off into other things that aren't on topic.
And then they can call the point of discussion, right? Or the point of
they can
point of order and bring it back to the discussion.
Yeah, that if I alluded to it earlier, but if someone thinks that discussion is kind of dragging on, maybe we're past time, or time was added, but we're not really talking about anything new. Anyone can rise and say, I call the previous question, or I call the question. That stops everyone from talking for that moment. You hold a vote right then and there that needs 2/3 of the people who would vote on the body, in the meeting to pass it. And if there's a 2/3 majority that says, yes, I would like to just vote on this, this will always confuses everybody. So when someone calls the question or calls the previous question, the first vote is, do you agree to stop debate right now? Yes or no? If no, or if you want to keep debating, you vote no, so you can keep debating about what's happening. If you think, nope, we're done, I would like to move on, you vote yes. And then immediately after that yes vote passes, you then are immediately voting on whatever you were previously talking about. So if it's, I vote to, if the motion was, we're approving this year's budget for the Illinois Jaycees, someone calls the previous question because we've been now here for 45 minutes talking about the same topic, and the amendments have gone through, we're done, people are trying to bring back amendments that were shot down. Call the question. Okay, yes, the question has been called on the the previous matter of approving the budget. All those in favor vote aye, nay, and you're done. So you have to vote twice. Because usually what I tell people when you're calling the question. But if the chair sees that discussion is waning, or that most people have had the chance to speak and it's pretty silent, they'll just say, seeing no further discussion, we'll call the vote and go on from there.
Thank you. I don't have anything else. And that was great and led into much further discussion that I didn't realize that was useful.
I like this topic a lot.
Like,
I have too much of it. I take too much fun. I have too much fun looking into it. And I think part of it is the larger the chapter, you kind of need to lean into this a little bit more. But really, this is parliamentary procedures is such an underutilized tool, I feel like, that can keep meetings and people interested. Because the idea is it keeps your meetings moving, so you are not there for 2 or 3 hours and everyone's kind of waxing over. Like an efficient meeting should be like an hour, really, to get through. Even the longer ones, an hour and a half, maybe. This is an effort to just keep everyone focused and on task.
I think that's a great way to describe it. Kim said, thanks for the review in the chats.
Of course, Kim. Thank you, Scott. All right, well, seeing no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Thank you again for coming out, and this will be available to watch on YouTube later tonight once everything is buffered and processed.